Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark, where we learn to accept living in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.tv, we relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We share information about the facts of radiation and the nuclear industry. We discuss vital current events and explore the roots of social engineering that has caused so many of our beloved friends and family to intentionally ignore the most critical, catastrophic event in human history. We interview activists who do the hard work to discover the truth and get the word out. We dispose the NRC's daily nuclear alerts and take phone calls from our listeners in an effort to fully engage on all topics that are changing our world. We explore exactly how radiation affects our bodies and minds to dissipate your fears and face the truth. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. We share information on how to take your life back from the systems intent on enslaving our bodies, minds, and souls. The Age of Fission radio show will create a venue that all will choose in order to actively engage to save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Good morning, UCY radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark again on Age of Fission Radio, Nuts for Art on my YouTube channel. Today is Call-In Friday, so I will be taking in phone calls to engage any of our listeners on the topic of really social engineering and the nuclear lies. Basically, in my view, the social engineering went hand in hand with the nuclear liars. They were working on it for quite a long time, the social engineering, and then they discovered the nuclear capacity. The Nazis discovered how to invent a man-made, I guess it's an element that they added. And ever since then, I guess we've all just been assets on a balance sheet, or maybe before then. But this morning I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the root causes of this whole lies of the nuclear industry. I mean, we see it's kind of astounding the way they're sort of bleeding it into other things. I don't know if any of you follow Fukushima Diary, but on Fukushima Diary, it's kind of an interesting meme what's happening in Japan. They're spreading the secrecy laws across a whole list of other ideas. There was a story that came out that said the Japanese government is requested information on Twitter on a multitude of accounts. I don't remember the exact number, but there was it doubled the amount of, what it says is doubles the amount of account information that they wanted. You know, it's kind of astounding that the Japanese are not just the Japanese people. We know they're fighting. We know they're in the street and they're protesting. But what I just cannot get over is the Japanese government, the lawmakers. I guess I'm nonplussed at the lack of caring by our own lawmakers across every country. I mean, it's beyond being an insider's club. It's a complete lack of caring for humanity. I mean, it is really astounding. One of the things I'd like to share with you this morning is an article that I actually found from one of my science classes again, and I am actually going to be going, since I am a student, I can access the scientific journals and scientific papers. And what I am going to be doing on my YouTube channel, I believe, is just printing these out and reading them. While I'm not the best reader, I do want to get the information out that is being hidden. This whole system of only students can access scientific papers unless you want to pay $500 per paper is outrageous. Again, it's a way to manipulate the populace. It's all about social engineering. You know, I'm going to be reading a short article. It's not very short, but I'll what I want to do. It's by John Goffman, Dr. John W. Goffman. He was the nuclear scientist from the Manhattan Project, who basically broke ranks with the nuclear apologists and started telling the truth. Wrote articles, and he was pretty much drummed out of the industry. Many people like myself did not even know who he was. I didn't know who John Goffman was before 2 years ago. So the importance of his work has been summarily buried by the social engineers who've decided we're on a need-to-know basis and we don't need to know. So the article of this presentation that he gave in Stockholm in 1992, listen to how long ago this was, 1992, folks. The title was called Biomedical Unknowledge and Nuclear Pollution, a Common Sense Proposal. It's about a 9 or 10 page article that it's basically, he gave a presentation to the people on the occasion of the Right Livelihood Award. But in it, he talks about the wish list versus a warning. And this wish list is exactly what they are implementing today. And that's why it's so urgent for us to really push back on this whole idea that hormesis is good for us. Let me get right into this because it's kind of fascinating. I want to talk to you about the nuclear cartels' desire to just ignore all levels of radiation monitoring now, and to tell people that hormesis is actually a good idea, that we don't have to worry about it. That idea of hormesis, which means that if you expose an organism to a little bit of something that's harmful to it, it'll actually eventually become good for that organism. Well, that theory of hormesis to radioactive exposure is completely false. There has been zero evidence that radiation is good for us. Man-made radiation is absolutely harmful to the human body. It's harmful to our DNA. It's harmful to our organs. It's like a little time bomb. It's a ticking time bomb. Once it comes into our bodies, it's just a matter of time before you get cancer, before you get diabetes. There's a whole host of things that can happen. Now, I'm not an expert on this. As many of you know, I came into this whole awareness thing quite late. Like, I wasn't even that freaked out when 3/11 happened. I thought, oh, great. Whew, I'm so glad it's right next to the ocean. We can put the ocean, the seawater right on this horrible thing and put it out. That's what I thought, just like everybody else in America. This is why I have to say, when I heard Kevin Blanche talk about the Post-Ignorance Project, I thought, wow, man, I am the perfect candidate for the Post-Ignorance Project because I am now post-ignorant. And honestly, it has been a shocking walk for the last 2.5, 3 years that I would never in a million years have believed I would have had to walk. So it is really kind of a shock for me. One of the things I wanted to share with you this morning was this wish list, because it gets back to this idea of hormesis. Right now, the NRC is considering a proposal by several licensees that says they're going to change the standard from an allowable, this is the layman's terms of it, folks. It's not the technical language, but they're going to change the standards from an allowable limit by measuring the radiation doses. Right now we have an acceptable limit. I don't know the number, but basically they'll warn us when 26 people get sick. 1 in 26 get sick from cancer. That's when they're going to. It used to be 1 in 10,000, and then Fukushima happened, and our esteemed purchased president from the nuclear cartel decided that he would agree and change the radiation levels. Instead of him telling us that we were under grave danger, cover up, and we need to put all our forces into stopping Fukushima, they just decided to go, oh, well, let's just change the radiation levels. We don't need to tell anybody you're being killed. We don't need to tell anybody that your children are going to be harmed. And oh, by the way, the cancer rate's not related to cancer. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it's kept me awake. It's not just awake, it wakes me up in the morning. I sleep fine at night, but I'll tell you what, I get going and I am ready to go. It's almost like if you talk to me about radiation or even anything in the energy cartel, to be honest, not just nuclear, but especially nuclear, it just pushes my buttons and I just like can't help but share all this information that I found out, which is why I'm on the radio. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So let me talk to you a little bit about this, the wish list. In this presentation that John Goffman gave in 1992 when he was accepting the Right Livelihood Award, he talked about a wish list versus a warning. And he said basically that the nuclear cartel really wants to have a wish list. He was asked, let me see if I can find, I apologize. The wish list is one. I'll just read the wish list without giving you the background on the intro to it. But the wish list, this is number one, the wish list. Best of all would be to find a little extra radiation improves human health. This speculation has a name, radiation hormesis. Some of the most avid proponents are already writing about the need to treat society in general for radiation deficiency disease. Now, this was written in 1992. They were trying to talk about radiation deficiency disease, as if we need radiation in our body. So this is where we're at, 1992 to 2015. Fast forward from there to now. And this is where we're at 30 years later, almost 35 years later, and our government is willing to just start poisoning every single person on the planet and in this country, because they are so greedy that they are willing to put us under the scalpel and make their little experiments. Number two, in case hormesis cannot be sold to the public, the next outcome would be evidence supporting a threshold dose of radiation below which no harm at all occurs. The safe dose, no risk claim has become exceedingly common after the Chernobyl accident. For example, the Department of Energy in 1987 on the probable health consequences of Chernobyl calls it a zero risk model. This report states that if all radiation doses below a half a rad are harmless, then Chernobyl creates zero risk for some 500 million people exposed to the fallout. The logic that is incomprehensible by these people who actually write papers, have conversations with themselves, and talk about it while they do know the science is shocking. I mean, it has been a culture of scientific lies. Unbelievable. And number three, if hormesis and thresholds are not successfully sold to the general public, the next, quote, product, unquote, is the familiar claim that the dose of radiation is far less harmful if it is received slowly over time than if the same dose is received all at once. Since 1980, the claim is 2 to 10 times is less harmful. This speculation is invoked to divide the observed cancer from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing by numbers up to 10. Predictions about injury by the slow doses from Chernobyl. I think they've stuck with the same story, you guys. It's been incomprehensible that they're actually really doing this. And we are living through it. And, you know, part of the social engineering is to make most people feel like they can't get engaged, they don't want to be engaged, and then to stop people who want to get engaged from feeling like anything that they can do will be useful. You know, one of the things that I was really stunned about when I first got interested in the Fukushima, I call it the Fukushima fight. At first, I did not know how many people were actively engaged in attempting to stop the nuclear cartel. I thought, wow, there's just not that many people. And as I go along in this, I've been engaged in it now about 2.5, 3 years. There are lots and lots of people engaged in it. And this is why I'm really grateful for this radio show, because my goal is to bring us all together, not separate us. It's not a one-man show. It's not about who can do what. It's not about getting a chain of people along the coast and holding hands and singing Kumbaya. That is 100% ineffective. What we really need to do is get people to challenge these nuclear liars and the nuclear laws. We need to get our own senators engaged. We need to actually find out why my own senator, and I have found out why, my own senator, Ron Wyden, is basically a little shill for the nuclear cartel these days. Patty Murray's a nuclear shill. You know, Patty Murray up in Washington State loves, I think it's $80 billion that comes into her state every single year to help with the complete destruction of Washington State by Hanford. I mean, Hanford should be shut down. Hanford needs to be revamped, and who's ever running that show needs to be fired. But because of the Price-Anderson Act, nobody's going to be fired. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with the Price-Anderson Act, but you ought to look it up. It's quite amazing. The Price-Anderson Act, which has been rubber stamped by Congress every year since 1957, basically states that no corporation or no individual can be held liable for any harm they have done knowingly or unknowingly. Now, I don't know about you, but if you had a job where you were intentionally harming somebody, you'd think that you would be held accountable. Up in Hanford, Bechtel decided that that government ordered them, some scientists came up with an idea to dig 40 miles of trenches, triple line it, and pour the radioactive waste in there so that, it could cool down faster. Bechtel decided we're going to save money. They dug the trenches and they started dumping the barrels. They did not triple line it. And they just dumped barrels on top of barrels on top of barrels and left them to rot. And now the radioactive waste is seeping into the groundwater at a slow rate up there in Hanford. And it has the potential, and probably likely will, destroy the drinking water in Seattle, up there in Seattle, Washington. Now, if you go to the Hanford website, the NRC website, they'll show you this, just kind of like what TEPCO does. They show you these really great graphics, like this little cartoon thing of them slicing out the earth and moving it out so that, people, to show how they're containing the contaminated waste and not to worry about it. Don't worry. Everything's fine, just fine. When in fact, nothing is fine up there. Nothing is fine. They do not have any idea how to stop the seepage into the groundwater. They're working on it. But because they have to do it in secret, they can't openly get the resources that they need. It's exactly like TEPCO. I mean, many of you probably do follow the Fukushima Diary website. And one of the things that he had on there was the fishermen in Fukushima granted TEPCO the right to dump millions of becquerels of radioactive waste into the ocean. Because in Japan, evidently, they can't wait to pour waste into the ocean without the permission of the people. So, I mean, I guess the people out there, they're like, well, what the fuck? Why not? There's no fish in the ocean anyways. I mean, it's an incomprehensible situation that we find ourselves in, folks. And it's the reason that I get up in the morning to really try to figure out how are we going to save humanity and save the planet. In the last week, we just saw that there was gross negligence, and now the Colorado River is grotesquely polluted. And we might add on Native American lands, another completely disregarded group. So we are in a grave time right now, and I understand why people don't want to think about it. But let me give you out the number, and let's see if I can actually engage other people. The number this morning is 718-717-8296, and that is UCY Radio. And please give me a call, and let's talk about the catastrophe of Fukushima, and in fact, the liars, the nuclear liars. And I would really like to engage some people on the idea of social engineering, because I am not lost at how 99% of the people who we engage on a daily basis, you mention Fukushima, their eyes gloss over. We mention the industrial military complex, their eyes gloss over. This morning I was reading, it was so offhanded, talking about how Ireland is not going to extradite some convicted terrorist, I guess he's a terrorist, to the United States because the United States is considered to be regularly torturing people with our supermax prison, where that the Boston bomber kid is going to be sent probably, where they put food through a slot. Family visits are only allowed 15 minutes twice a month, and nobody gets to talk to this human being. That drives people crazy. That's considered torture. I mean, it's an outrage. I mean, when I read that article, the way they talked about it, it was kind of stunning for me because did I know that that super prison was even going on in Colorado? No, I didn't. And I imagine millions of Americans don't either. I mean, we hear about the overcrowding in the prisons, and we hear about the convictions of black people at a rate like, what is it, 8 times higher than they are of white people for the same crime. You get a sentence that's something like 8 times higher for the same crime if you're black. I have a little bit of experience with that. I have family members who are half black. My sister married a black man, and I'll tell you what, her children are harassed and have been in jail. My nephew lives in Los Angeles and stopped driving a car because he got sick of being pulled over by the police for no reason. So he drives his bike to work. He lives about 10 miles away from his work, and he drives his bicycle to work. And guess what? He still gets pulled over by the cops on his bicycle. It's unbelievable the level of harassment that happens in our country. And, you know, when we talk about countries, like we're talking about planet Earth, we have no capacity right now to really comprehend, the big gigantic picture. There's just too many pieces of the pie going on. And I call that social engineering. That was intentionally done because it's impossible for one human being to really pull it all together. So I'm going to read a little bit more from this thing because John Goffman was a very esteemed scientist. And until he disagreed with the nuclear cartel that we should not use nuclear power, that nuclear energy had great potential, but we should not implement it. We should not have nuclear bombs. We should not use it for anything until we understand what to do with the waste that it causes. He was one of the first people, actually, to start telling us that there was nuclear waste. It's kind of shocking. We did not know there was nuclear waste for 20 years. So John Goffman, in this speech that he gave in 1992, talks about the rules, the 9 essential rules of inquiry in the medical sciences. The first rule was comparable groups. An essential condition is to compare comparable groups. The second rule is a real difference in dose. One of the things that is not happening now is they're not comparing dose levels. They are lying about all of the dose levels that everybody is getting. The third rule is a sufficiently big difference in dose. So you give people the same dose and then you give a substantially difference in dose. The fourth rule is careful reconsideration or reconstruction of the dose. The fifth rule is blinding by dose analysis. The sixth rule is blinding of diagnostic analysis. The seventh is no changes to input after any results are known. Well, we already know they lie about all this. This is why we call this non-science. The eighth rule, no excessive subdivision of data, which is what the nuclear cartel does all the time. And the ninth rule is no prejudgments. You know, one of the biggest things that they did was they violated the rule number 7, says no changes in input after the results are known. This is the number one thing that the nuclear cartel does every single time. Anytime there is anything where the nuclear industry comes up and it's a clear pointing to them, they rearrange the numbers. I think I even read this, and I don't know how factual it is, but I've read that the Japanese government is actually changing their population rolls. So they're saying that they actually have less people so they don't have to report as many deaths. You know, it's so completely inhumane what happens in our planet these days. I don't know. My goal on being on this radio show is to help people get active and to help put a fire under your butt so that you're willing to get out and do what it takes. Like I am going to be creating this this petition that I'm going to be walking around on the hormesis issue. Our comments have to be submitted to the NRC by September 8th. So I'm going to create a petition, and I'm going to make it an open link, and I will have it on my YouTube channel and also on my Facebook page. My Facebook page is open to the public. It's Lonnie Clark, Lonnie, Lonnie Clark. And I encourage anybody to take this petition and get signatures and submit it to the NRC by the 8th, because it is extremely important that we at least hold them accountable to some scientific level. Hormesis has been unproven 100%. Radiation, there is no safe dosage of radiation. We've known that probably for 10 years since we've known about the nuclear industry. It has been there's a man out in New Mexico who's been testing beagles for the last 30 years. How low of a level of radiation can we make it safe so that it doesn't harm anybody? And these beagles, no matter how low he gets the radiation dose, the beagles always die or get sick. There is no level of safe radiation on our planet. And right now we have nuclear power plants in Fukushima that are still spewing billions of becquerels of radiation. Now they're admitting it used to be 100,000 becquerels, 50,000 becquerels. Now they're just admitting they don't really care. This is actually what I think about the Colorado spill in the Colorado River. I think this is why they also want to change the radiation standards to hormesis, because they know they do not have the science necessary to stop Fukushima. We do not comprehend that level. Our brains we haven't worked it through. We don't understand. There's so much we don't understand in science. I mean, we're basically like a 2-year-old child with a lighter, and we're walking around turning on, lighting everybody's houses on fire. So the idea in Colorado that they just dumped all that contaminated waste into the Colorado River, when I heard about that, I thought, you know what that's about? They know that the radiation is so bad that they need other excuses. The radiation is bad. They really don't care who knows what anymore. They really don't honestly care whether we know that they're killing us or not, because there's really nothing that we're going to do about it. How many hundreds of people actually run the show in the entire planet? Maybe 100,000, if that many people actually make the decisions. So they don't care who they torture mentally or emotionally. That big mega prison that the United States pays for, what happened to the idea of the United States being the stalwart of democracy, and the idea that we treated our prisoners correctly, and that people here in the United States actually had legal civil rights? That all went out the window with the Unpatriot Act. And for years and years, I called my own senator and said, look, we've got to revoke the Unpatriot Act. And his office actually had the nerve to tell me, well, if he did any of that, he might be threatening, he might be threatened to go to jail. I mean, maybe that's what we need. We need some of our elected officials to be willing to stand up and be willing to go to jail. I mean, we do have an elected official, Don Siegelman, who is still in jail, and Obama has refused to pardon him. And I don't know if many of you know about the story about Don Siegelman, but Don Siegelman was basically a pretty progressive elected official. I cannot recall the state. Karl Rove went after him and finagled things and basically set up a case where he was convicted of a crime he did not commit, and it came out well after his conviction that he did not commit the crime. He was one of the best advocates that we had in regards to the entire issue of being rational about the nuclear issue. And right now, he was summarily drummed out of the industry, and now we have 40 years of basic nuclear lies. We have cancer epidemics. We have children with cancer, and people act like it's normal. Oh, my daughter got cancer. My niece got cancer. She's 5, she's 10. Little tiny children with cancer, and people aren't flipping out over it. So it's kind of a shock. I have to admit, it is kind of a shock. Let me come back to Lao Tzu, you guys, because Lao Tzu seems to soothe this soul when I get a little bit rattled, which, having been dropped off the internet, rattled me. So let me read you from Lao Tzu's book, translated by Witter Bynner. Knowledge studies others. Wisdom is self-known. Muscle masters brothers. Self-mastery is bone. Content need never borrow. Ambition wanders blind. Vitality cleaves to the morrow, leaving death behind. That was actually pretty sweet, and I picked that up randomly. So look, you guys, we have got to really start to fight back. If me talking about John Goffman is going to cause a problem with my internet connection, then you know it's a really serious thing. How long did it take them? 10 or 15 minutes to suss that up, that I'm actually going to go after them. And I am going to go after them on a regular basis. So this is kind of an outrage, and I have, no idea what happened to my internet connection. It's working perfectly fine on my PC, but it is not working on my laptop where I connect to Skype. So how did that happen? And we connect on UCY TV through Skype. It's a much more effective way of doing it. So I was able to grab my cell phone and call you right back. So anyways, wow. It's been a rough week, you guys. I mean, I have to say, this has been kind of a hard week. On Wednesday, I had an issue with the internet, and then, I thought I was going to take a phone call, and I put you on hold, and today the internet just drops. So I'm going to persevere. I don't give up very easily. One of the things about me is that, we need to be dogged about deciding that we are determined, that we are going to really, save the planet. And this is really what it's about. This is really, really what it's about right now. We need to save the planet. What's going on in Colorado was an intentional disregard for human life and all life on this planet. Just like what's going on in Fukushima, complete disregard. The news in Colorado, they said, oh, well, it's going to take 10 years. It's going to take 10 years for that pollution to go away. It's not going to take 10 years. It's going to take a lot longer than 10 years to go away. It's going to take 10 years just for the most catastrophic things that happened to stop. That's it. But it's not going to take just 10 years for that pollution to just go away. The planet does not recover like that. You can't get back the lives. It's like the clear cutting. They're clear cutting the redwood trees, 2,000-year-old trees, and they're putting in new redwood trees. Well, a redwood tree takes 500 years to grow again to a full adult size. So that means that our grandchildren will never see the redwood trees that they've cut down. Not just our grandchildren, but our children's children and their children's children. And then maybe we might, in 3 or 4 or 5 generations, if humans are still around, be able to see the redwoods that we have decimated in this culture. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there has been a complete disregard for life on Earth. And it's just been about money. And it's been about not giving everybody money. It's been about giving a few people money. And what's kind of ironic is the people who are willing to, what I call the earth murderers, they actually get people to vote for them. They get elected. There's such a cultural disregard for life on the planet that these people actually get elected. It's incomprehensible. One of the things that we really need to do is, stand up to them. I mean, the only thing that I can think of is, submit these petitions. I personally am not into violence. I do not think we need to promote violence in any way. And I don't think it saves the planet. I don't think it helps us at all. And so, I really believe that it's up to us to make a difference, and we can choose to do it. We can choose to make it really work for all of us. And, I really believe that our thoughts are things. I came from a family of very severe abuse when I was a child. And early on, I had to decide that I was going to be happy and that I could make my life something better than what I was born into. And I have. And that's kind of where we're at now. It's kind of stunning to see these young people who really basically don't care about their lives because they think that life is just a pile of shit and there's nothing that they can do about it. And I disagree with that. And the goal of why I'm on UCY Radio is to actually make it work here and to make the youth. I really would love to engage the youth and get them actively engaged to feel like that they have some kind of control in their lives and that we can make the future better. It does look bleak because the industrial military complex has basically taken over the entire planet. I mean, we have seen that the military rules everything. We had that big explosion in China the other day. We have no idea what that really was. They say it was a tanker. We don't know. You know, China runs that whole thing with China is another whole box of wax that we don't even know about here in the States. I mean, this is the thing. As I'm sharing this information with you, if you piece it all together, you can actually see that as a species, this is what makes people feel like they're out of control. It's because we really don't know. And then there comes the point of there's a lot of minimalists here that I live. I live in Eugene, Oregon. People live out in the woods and out in the country, and they're like, look, we don't need to know. What we need to know is learn how to make our own food, how to cook. And when you get at a base level, yes. But, ask the people who are living in any third world country what it feels like to live without services. You do have to band together, and you can make it work. But the idea of living in a civilized nation where people can actually, and in a civilized world where children don't die of childhood diseases, elderly don't die of starvation. That's what used to happen in America before the New Deal came around, before we forced people into taking care of the elderly and the children and the poor. The rich people in this, basically, they've done studies that show the more money you have, the less connected you are actually to the sense of humanity. And it is kind of an outrage that we really have no capacity at all to change what's going on. So I guess the fishermen in Fukushima, they just said, okay, fine, dump the radioactive waste in the sea because it doesn't matter. There's no fish there anyways. I mean, it's almost a sense of, it's like torture. The world is being collectively tortured right now. And it makes me wonder, the people that are in power. Before this internet thing started, I started to talk about my own senator, Ron Wyden. He went to Japan 3, 4, 5 times. And he summarily he allowed it all to go under the guise of the Patriot Act, so that now if I call my senator's office and ask him what's going on with Fukushima, they can't talk to us because it's considered a national security issue. That's completely outrageous. This is one of the it is the most catastrophic event that has ever happened in human history. There are 3, at least, nuclear power plants in full meltdown. And our own government will not even talk to us about it. And in fact, instead of talking to us about it, what they're trying to do is change the radiation levels that says, well, it's good for us, so we're not going to be comparing the standards. Basically, the hormesis theory, what I believe that the ultimate thing is that they're just not going to measure the radiation. They're going to stop measuring it. They don't want to have to measure it because the rates are getting off the charts. Those of us, I think it's called radcast.org. There's a group of people around the country, because our government is not testing the radiation in the air. People are testing the radiation on their own. And they're reporting it. There's a map that you can follow. I personally don't subscribe to it just because I happen to have known somebody I got tainted by the facts because I knew somebody who participated here in Eugene who was upping the numbers, because he didn't believe the numbers on his own Geiger counter. I went, really? That is definitely not a scientific method. You don't change the numbers after the input, right? So, but these things actually do have value. I'm not saying that everybody does that, and probably not very many people do it. So, but what's the point? Kevin Blanche says, what's the point of these, taking it? Because what does it matter if it's, 25 becquerels, 200, 300, what are you going to do about it? If it's, what if the becquerels are 150, counts per minute? Then what? Who are you going to go tell? Your doctor? You're going to call your senator and say, hey, we're being radiated. And they're going to go, oh, yeah, we're all being radiated. So we're going to have to pay attention to it. Finally, I don't think so. They're not going to do that at all. In fact, they're going to dig their heels in and go into deeper denial. I mean, look, Joe Biden's own son, Beau, died of brain cancer. Where did he get that? We know where he got it from. Jimmy Carter has now been diagnosed with cancer. He's been flying all around the world. How did he get that cancer? Probably by being exposed to high levels of radiation. And probably it's all throughout his body. If you listen to the nuance of the news, it sounds like it's all throughout his entire body. So, I don't know, folks. I think it's really important for us to just pay attention and have a good heart. And I will encourage everyone who listens to this radio show to make sure that you get yourselves bottles of curcumin, Cucurmin. That's the active ingredient of turmeric at a high level. You'd have to take 4 or 5 tablespoons of turmeric every day to get the same dose of curcumin that you get from a little tablet in a bottle. There was a pretty severe flu going around here last week, and when it happened, I just took an extra tablet of curcumin and I did not get sick. And I really believe that we can fight off the radiation. We can fight off the illnesses that are coming our way. The unfortunate part of what we cannot do is prevent the in utero mutilation, and we cannot prevent the spontaneous abortions, the miscarriages that happen because of the exposure to radiation. But we can, once we're here and once we're alive, we can actually really take care of ourselves. We need to eat plenty of berries, B vitamins, get your flax seeds in. I mean, there are things you can do to make your body wholesome and healthy. And the only way that we're going to stave off radiation is by having a very nice, strong system. You want to make sure you walk every day. All that, the usual thing that the doctors tell you, that you hear on the television all the time, that you hear on the radio, that you read in the books, it's all the same thing. And then fundamentally get past the lack of caring. I mean, this is really the bottom line, is what prevents people from actually eating a wholesome, healthy lifestyle of food, how is it that people can go and pour Doritos down their throat 5 times a week? When we know that stuff does nothing, it's an anti-nutrient. It actually takes your body nutrients to digest it. So, look, I apologize for the internet glitch that we've had today, and I am not going to be able to take phone calls. Maybe on Monday I'll start taking them. I have no idea what happened to my internet connection, but thank goodness for my cell phone, because I was able to call back pretty quickly and get back on here. Hopefully I'll be able to get all these technical glitches. I have no idea what happened, but I apologize, and thank you for hanging in there with me. So one of the things that I do want to do on a regular basis is bring you different ideas. Like I read that little poem by Lao Tzu. And then there's another really great book that I'd like to share with you. There's a few books that are really great that bolster our hearts and help us get through the very difficult times. And I don't know if many of you know, she's a Buddhist monk by the name of Pema Chodron, Chodron, Pema. And she wrote a really great book called When Things Fall Apart, Hard Advice for Difficult Times. And this book is quite inspiring because it teaches us how to be brave. It teaches us how to be strong. And it also teaches us about the discipline of deciding that we are going to thrive in a world that that appears to be harming us intentionally. And that, when I was reading that, I was like, wow, that's kind of exactly where we're at, because we are in a system that almost intentionally harms us. So one of the things that we must do on our planet right now is decide that we're going to be happy, and decide that we are going to look for the brighter side. We live in a culture where it's all about the social engineering, where we have been basically trained to think negative thoughts. And we automatically think negative thoughts. We live in a fear-based society where we think that things are never going to get better. We have given up. And in fact, things have gotten better. Humanity is growing up. There's a large portion of humanity that is a lot better than it used to be 300, 400, 500 years ago. Women have rights, children have rights, men have rights, and at a core level of things that we just take for granted. We don't see children being sold in the streets now anymore. Although at least that's in the United States. I can't say that's not true in other parts of the world, because other parts of the world where there's severe oppression, uh, those kinds of things do happen. So let me get back to the nuclear news. Actually, you know what? I can't get back to the nuclear news because my internet is gone. So I am going to pull out some of my documents that I have been reading from you, because these documents are really quite amazing. Oh, wow, my internet just popped back up. So I'm going to see if I can get back on there. I don't think that I can, though, because not even if you can't connect to Google, it means your internet's not up. So that's the sad part about all of this. So on this article from John Goffman from 1992, he was talking about how the atomic bomb survivor study was fundamentally flawed. One of the things that they did was they changed the rules. They changed the information. They shuffled the data. They refused to talk about what causes the radiation. And one of the things that he was talking about, let me see, I apologize. As a result of a more favorable nuclear pollution, the Rule 7 has been broken more often than it has been obeyed on two key issues. First, the radiation-induced cancer. They basically changed all of the information. The analysis, with every step visible from raw data to conclusion, is in our 1990 book. He wrote a book on this. We compare the results of those scientists who shuffled the database. The difference is like night and day. The shuffled deck suggests that low radiation is less harmful per dose unit than the high radiation. Basically, what John Goffman is talking about is exposing the lies of the nuclear cartel from the very get-go. Because from the very beginning, the nuclear cartel wanted to sell radiation to everybody. They saw it as something that they could do. And let me see if I can actually connect on the internet to see if I could maybe take a phone call today. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but let's just see right now. Okay, yes, I'm back, and I'm just going to keep talking on my cell phone. I think my internet is back up, and I apologize for that disruption, you guys. I don't know what happened, but it did happen. So going back to this thing about the radiation, one of the things that we really need to press our elected officials about is that they cannot take the information given to us by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is why we really need to push back. And I would suggest that if you do copy my petition to the NRC, that you also send it to your senator, and you also send it to your federal congressman, because they're just regular people in Washington, D.C., and, they're living the good life. They're in Washington, D.C., getting all these funds. They spend their time, dialing for dollars so they can keep getting reelected, and they just listen to anybody who walks through their door with a check. Now, in terms of being an elected official, people's names on a petition are like money. If we get 100 names on a petition and you walk into an elected official's office and say, hey, I have 100 names of people who want you to vote for this or against it, that's like handing them a check, probably for $100,000. You know what I mean? Because really our voice, the only thing that we have is our voice. We can't compete with the Koch brothers. We can't compete with the Walmart family. But what we can compete with is the threat that there is something else. And I see somebody trying to call me. Let me see if I can figure this one out. I don't think I can. Hold on. I hear somebody trying to call me. Let me see if I can connect to the internet and add you in, because I don't want to put you on hold like I did before. So let me see. I don't think that's going to work. Add. Let's see if that will work. Good morning. You're on UCY.TV radio. This is Lonnie Clark. Well, I don't think it worked, folks, and I'm just going to keep talking because I think that It's kind of a nerve-wracking day here on the radio because my internet went down. So I'm just going to keep talking on my cell phone. And I will make phone calls available on Monday. I apologize for this, but there is not much I can do about it. I'm going to have to study up on the whole internet thing and figure out why my internet gets dropped, but that's what happened. So back to this idea about John Goffman trying to warn the world about how the nuclear scientists are lying to us on a regular basis and why it's so important for us to get out into our community, knock on doors, bring them information. When I put up this petition I'm going to make it an open link so people can open up the link, print it out, and start doing your own walking. I'm going to actually put up some information from John Goffman, from Arthur Tamplin, from Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling, by the way, won a Nobel Peace Prize for exposing that fact that radiation causes babies in utero severe, severe harm. And they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize for that. People have forgotten about it, but I'm going to send links on this petition so that when you're talking to your neighbors, you can actually give them real information. You can have it written down. Part of the issue is people don't want to be involved in the anti-nuclear movement because people go, well, if it was that bad for us, the government just wouldn't let it be that bad. Yes, they would, folks. They would let it be that bad. And we are assets on the balance sheet. And unless we want to change that paradigm, it's up to us to change the paradigm. If we just continue to stay silent, we're not going to change the paradigm. Their decision to use us as assets on the balance sheet is not my decision, and I refuse that. So I'm going to do everything I can, and I'm going to push through every challenge that happens, like being kicked off the internet in the middle of a radio show. So I appreciate all of you for hanging in there with me. Hopefully we'll have some phone calls on Monday. And I really look forward to talking to everybody, getting this stuff together next week. I'll make sure that my internet connection is strong. I see that we're coming on to less than a minute left on the radio show, and I really appreciate everybody hanging in there with me today. It's kind of been a hard week for me on this second week on the Age of Fission radio show, understanding the logistics of actually doing this work 3 times a week. But I really appreciate it. I do look forward to having interviews. The plan is on Mondays, read information. Wednesdays, get interviews going on. And on Fridays, we can have some phone calls so we can engage each other. I really appreciate your time, you guys. And please do take care of yourself. And put your courage feet on.